Monsieur le Président,
Mr. President of the Senate,
Mr.
President of the National Assembly, Mr. President of the Economic, Social and Environmental Council, Prime Minister,
Madame la maire de Paris,
Ministers, Mayor of Paris, Madame the President of the region of Île-de-France, Members of Parliament, ambassadors, responsible for the different relations, ladies and gentlemen. Like everybody, I would have wished this dinner, the second that I have attended as a President of the Republic, would have taken place in better circumstances. We could speak about Claude Lanzmann with emotion. What he offered at the age of 18, what he offered with the monument of the Shoah, this work against forgetting. We would have remembered Marceline, who disappeared in September, who conveyed the memory of the Shoah. Georges Joinger, who left us in December, a hero. He saved more than 400 children during the Second World War. We would have spoken about this wonderful morning in July where the people of France assembled around the blue, red and white of Simone Veil. Simone Veil, who knew the horrors of the camps, and she found the strength of fighting for the memory, for women, for Europe, the universal work of France. We would have spoken about the friendship that lasted for 70 years between Israel and France, the cultural season of 2018, the visit of President Rivlin in Paris, that was the end of these cultural events. We would have spoken about René Cassin and his role in the Declaration of Human Rights, common to all nations. We have just celebrated the 70th anniversary. Yes, each and every one of us would have loved to evoke all of this. This Jewish part of the French soul, the history of French Jews who have contributed to making our nation what it is. But the moment that we're going through requires more serious words. For a number of years, and the situation is becoming worse in the last few weeks, our country, as the whole of Europe, and nearly all of Western democracies are facing a resurgence of anti-Semitism, unheard of since the Second World War. Again, and for many years, anti-Semitism is killing in France. It is good that we remember the faces, not only of the heroes that I have just reminded you of, but the martyrs as well, recently murdered because they were Jewish. Mireille Hitnol, a Parisian, 85 years old, Sarah Halimi, mother of three, that was killed by her murderer, Ilan Hamidi, 20 years old, tortured, assassinated. And then the victims of the hypermarket attack, Willy Brandt, Johan Cohen, Yoav Attab, François-Michel Sada, the school of Zeratora. I think of the children, Arié and Gabriel, and the little one, Myriam. We do not forget them.
Le crépuscule du XXe siècle avait pu laisser entrevoir
At the end of the 20th century, we thought that there was a possibility of a durable withdrawal of anti-Semitism. The dawn of the 21st century reminds us how history is tragic and how evil powers are there. The black is back.
Et qu'un fils de déportés juifs polonais qui aime la
A
France,
son
sa
of a
langue,
deported
au point de
who
devenir membre
loves
de l'Académie
France
française,
and
soit
became
insulté par une
a
foule
member
haineuse
of
en
the
rentrant chez lui.
French Academy was
Qu'à Paris,
insulted when he was
sur une
going home.
devanture
In
de restaurant
Paris,
soit peinte, entourée de croix gammées,
restaurants
l'inscription
painted with
Juden.
swastikas,
Que
with
sur la mairie
Juden,
du 13e arrondissement, le visage de Simone Veil soit
the
recouvert
face of
des
Simone
mêmes
Veil
croix gammées. Qu'en
covered
Alsace,
with swastikas,
des
and
dizaines
in
de tombes juives
Alsace,
soient profanées, comme si on avait voulu
the desecration of tombs and graves.
Que des représentants religieux juifs, des
Religious
militants de la cause
representatives,
antiraciste, des journalistes
militants of anti-racism
menacés,
are insulted,
cher Joël Mergui,
threatened. Cher
cher
Joël
Ariel
Mergui,
Goldman, cher Philippe Val,
Ariel Goldman,
cher
Philippe Val,
Armand Muguet.
dear
Dans un
all,
même nihilisme, une même
in the same
violence,
nihilism, the same
charriant
violence.
rejet du sacré et anti-parlementarisme. On s'en prenne à des églises, à des élus.
They go against the church, they go against those who were
Malheureusement.
chosen by the people. I could go on with the list.
Et dire ce que trop d'anonymes subissent
I could say what
et n'osent même
many anonymous persons do not dare say.
face à cet inacceptable.
In the face of this unacceptable, it
Nous
would
n'avons rien fait.
be forced to say that we didn't do anything. We have condemned a lot.
Adopté des plans,
We have adopted
souvent,
plans,
depuis des
often,
années et des années,
for years and years.
voté des lois
We have
parfois,
voted laws sometimes,
mais nous n'avons pas su agir efficacement.
but we have not been able to act efficiently.
Et
That's
si
true.
nous en sommes là aujourd'hui,
And if we are where we are today, that is the
cette
reason.
litanie que je viens de reprendre,
This litany that I have just mentioned is
trop d'indignation,
the fact that there is too much indignation,
pas assez de résultats.
but not enough results.
Le temps est donc venu des actes
It is time to act.
concrets. Parce que je ne veux pas m'habituer à ces mots.
I don't want to get used to these words and this indignation.
Qu'une âme
There's
perverse,
something worse than an evil soul.
c'est une âme habituée.
It is a soul that has been
Nous n'avons
accustomed
pas le
to
droit de
evil.
devenir des âmes habituées.
We cannot become accustomed.
D'abord, nommer le mal.
First of all, we have to name this evil.
Qui ne voit que l'antisémitisme se cache de plus en plus sous le
Anti-Semitism
masque de l'antisionisme.
is hiding itself
Je l'ai dit,
behind
Lors du 75e anniversaire de la
anti-Zionism.
rafle du
I
Veldiv,
said so. In
l'antisionisme
the past,
est une des
anti-Zionism
formes
is
modernes
one of
de
the modern
l'antisémitisme.
forms of anti-Semitism.
C'est pourquoi je confirme
That
que
is
la
why
France,
I confirm
comme vous l'avez
that
rappelé, l'a
France
endossé en décembre avec
as
ses
you
partenaires européens,
reminded us,
mettra en
together
œuvre
with
la définition de
its
l'antisémitisme
European
adoptée par
partners,
l'Alliance
will
internationale
put
pour la
in
mémoire de la Shoah.
force the definition of anti-Semitism and the memory of the Shoah.
Il ne s'agit pas de modifier le code pénal,
The idea is
encore
not
moins
to
d'empêcher
change
ceux
the
qui
penal
veulent
code or
critiquer, comme
to
vous l'avez rappelé, Monsieur le Président,
avoid
la politique
criticism.
israélienne de le faire,
Those
non.
who criticize Israel, they can go on
Nous
criticizing.
connaissons
That's not the
et
point.
qui sont ceux de
These
la
are subjects
politique
that are
internationale
known
et
by
sur
all
ce
of
sujet, la
us.
position
We're talking
française
about
est
international
connue.
policy,
Et l'année
and the
dernière,
position of
nous en
France is
avions
well known.
débattu.
Last year we spoke about
Il
this,
s'agit de préciser,
but we
de
have
raffermir les pratiques
to
de nos forces de
reaffirm
l'ordre, de nos magistrats,
the practice
de nos
of order,
enseignants, de leur permettre
the
de mieux
judges, the
lutter
teachers,
contre
to
ceux
allow them
qui
to
cachent
fight better
derrière le
against
rejet
those
d'Israël,
who hide
la négation
behind
même
the
de
denial
l'existence
of the
d'Israël,
existence of
la
Israel,
haine du juif, la
the
primaire.
hatred against Jews, a primary hatred.
De la même manière,
In the
il
same
n'y
way,
aura aucune complaisance à l'égard des
there will be
pratiques
no
de boycott
complacency
du BDS
regarding
plusieurs fois
boycott
condamnées en
or
France
BDS.
et qui le seront à nouveau.
We have fought against it and we will continue to fight against it.
Regardez ensuite la réalité en face.
We have to face reality.
Sans filtre.
Without filters.
Oui, à côté, malheureusement,
yes,
de l'antisémitisme traditionnel.
Faced with the traditional anti-Semitism, we are seeing now a new anti-Semitism based on Islamic radicalism.
Oui, cette idéologie gangrène certains de nos quartiers.
This ideology is taking place in some of our Iman neighborhoods.
Et oui.
And yes,
c'est à une reconquête républicaine de ces territoires que nous devons
we have to reconquer these territories. We have to create posts for policemen, 45 of whom multiplying the services given by the state, national education, civil servants, and methodically creating a plan against radicalism or radicalization.
À l'opposition bloc à bloc dans laquelle certains voudraient enfermer la société française.
Some would want to have French society facing one religion against another, one stigmatization against another.
Tous les citoyens.
Our law protects all of our citizens, all confessions, all words. It cannot accept,
en aucun cas,
in any case, that on behalf of one religion or a philosophy, whichever it is, the worst is done. Because this is our republic. It is our freedom, our liberty, which is in cause. To punish those that are responsible for anti-Semitic acts, there is nothing more difficult for victims. The feeling that anything goes, undermining the authority of the state. So I know all victims of anti-Semitic acts should protest and come up as soon as they are attacked. We must make sure that we will do everything in our power, from the policemen to listening to them, or to even start a procedure online with the new justice law that should be implemented as soon as possible. On this subject, we have to say so. We have become accustomed to uncertain procedures, claims that were not listened to. Things have been simplified. They should be implemented. In fact, we have to do something about it. We will do everything in order to gather evidence. There will be teams created all over our national territory together with the Foundation Condemil. Mr. President, you have spoken about anti-Semitism called virtual anti-Semitism, but it is only virtual by name. In this hatred without a face that believes is above the law, to go out in the street and do the worst. These social networks that are used to speak about this international Jewish complot, this is also something we have to fight against clearly and forcefully. We have started working with platforms such as Facebook, who has chosen France to create a fund of €1 million against hatred, and that has accepted the presence within it of regulators and jurists from France to improve their practice. I said so last year. I spoke about this. I have the will to create a European program. The work was done to make it possible, and you have mentioned it. The report from on this subject proposed specific measures. This European fight has to go on, but it is too slow, and we cannot wait anymore. That is why the MP Laetitia will present to the Parliament as soon as possible in May a bill against hatred that will include the conclusions of the report. We have to inspire, find inspiration on what our neighbors have done. Sanctions, judicial, penal, and money-wise. We have to go against the responsibility and the platforms. We're talking about foreign sites which are very difficult to be blocked. And in this context, the question of anonymity will, of course, be on the table. It is too often the masks of those who do not take responsibility, and there's always behind that a name, a face, and a responsibility. Should we prohibit anonymity within the internet completely? Well, perhaps we could do so. Perhaps we should think about it. But what we can't accept is that because there is anonymity, the content is not withdrawn as soon as possible. The identity is not searched for. There is today platforms such as Twitter, to give the bad examples, who wait for weeks, sometimes for months, to provide the identity in order to start a judicial procedure against those who promote hatred, to withdraw the content. Weeks and months go by. What this text will include is clear provisions with the withdrawal as soon as possible of all content calling for hatred, and using all the techniques that will allow us to find the identity as soon as possible, and making sure that there is a responsibility, a liability, including judicially.
Il nous faut adopter nos sanctions à la société numérique. We
have to provide sanctions. We have to have the means to forbid the presence in social media of those who promote hatred. As we do in football stadiums, we have to make sure that racist acts are made public so that we can find the persons responsible.
Elle ne doit plus ronger les victimes.
Victims should not feel shame.
Les agresseurs.
The aggressors should be shamed.
Parce que la période met en cause ce que nous sommes.
Because this period underlines what we are. If we have to draw red lines, we will do so with specific measures, with the decisions that the law allows us to make. And that is why I have asked the Minister of Interior to start procedures in order to dissolve associations who promote hatred, promote discrimination, or make appeals for violence. Blood and Honor, Hexagone, and Combat 18, to begin with.
Nommer, poursuivre,
to name, to pursue,
punir,
to punish,
mais bien entendu,
but of course,
éduquer.
At the end of the day, to educate. We should never forget the time it takes to educate culture, the spiritual elevation of all of us, because what we are living in our society, in our country, speaks a lot about our own failures, of what we have allowed to grow without realizing, what we have not denounced, or perhaps what we forgot to say.
If the
history has shown that knowledge is not an antidote against hatred, we know that ignorance, for sure, is a fertile ground. Our tutors, our teachers, are exemplary to teach the memory of the Holocaust. They are backed by institutions such as the Memory of the Shoah or the Memorial of the Shoah. The Minister of Education is involved in this fight. You have mentioned that, Mr. President. We have to educate more, we have to train more, we have to be more demanding. The state will support even more than it does today the Memorial of the Shoah.
La DILCRA apporte aujourd'hui une aide. Elle sera significativement augmentée.
We do support it already, but the Prime Minister will provide even more funds in the next few weeks.
Ces instituteurs, ces professeurs sont
these teachers, these tutors have to work by themselves too often, especially in these neighborhoods that have the gangrene of radical Islamism. Sometimes coexistence has become impossible. These teachers, these tutors, will always find the Republic behind them. At a national level, a reaction team will provide a solution in 24 hours whenever a difficulty arises. Clear messages have been conveyed so that everything will be said, any problem, as soon as we see it. But too often we have seen in these places in the Republic children that have left public schools. We have to say things as they are, to go to private schools, whatever the confession, because something happened. The children or the teachers or the parents did not dare to say. That's why I have asked the minister to adopt specific measures to make an audit regarding all the schools where there's a descolarization of Jewish children. That is, where Jewish children have left public schools. When this happens, it means something. Sometimes we didn't see or perhaps didn't say. Beyond that, the school has to work against prejudice and hatred, but also against the empire of immediacy, this absolute relativism, to teach the scientific method, the historical method. All the children in France will be aware of the great civilization. Everything that brings tolerance, so that it will be in the heart of our education. Sometimes we have forgotten that. It is in the heart of education where we have to provide the means to fight against those who have installed themselves among us. This anything goes, this relativism that corrupts everything. Dear friends, we have to act, and we will have to report, and that is why I wanted to be here with you tonight, because anti-Semitism is not a problem for Jews, it's a problem for the Republic. And because those who think that anti-Semitism concerns only some, just one community within the Republic, should never forget our history, our common history, what we are. Anti-Semitism is just hatred for the other. Look at the shape it takes. It is always the hatred against communism or capitalism. hatred against foreign forces or the enemy within. It is all of these hatreds together. It takes all the faces. It nourishes, it feeds from everything. But there's only one at the other side, the other. Anti-Semitism is a problem for the Republic because there is this avant-garde hatred, but which takes along all the other hatreds. And while we're speaking, these other hatreds are rising. Hatred against the Muslims, racism, anti-LGBT, all the different forms of hatred against the elected ones, the authorities, the parliament, the sacred churches, all religions. For all of these reasons, anti-Semitism is a question for the whole Republic and for France. Because at the heart of our histories, there are people who don't want to see anymore. I'm not going to speak about all the great figures from Rachid, Bergson, Paul, Simone Weil, Robert Badinter. France owes so much to all those that have contributed to its construction, that have given it the face it has today. But too many of our citizens are not aware in our country that for centuries and centuries, great Jews, commentators of the sacred text, have lived in France, are known all over the world. The greatest commentators of the Bible and the Talmud lived in France and made some of the villages they lived in famous. Samuel ben Salomon de Salaise, Samson ben Isaac de Chinon, Moïse d'Evreux, Thérèse ben Elia de Corbeil, Moïse de Coucy, Isaac ben Samuel de Jean-Pierre, Samson de Sens, Eliakim de Chalon, Jacob de Pont-Audemer, Mattathias d'Avalon, Salomon de Château-Landau, Meshulam de Banton de Melun, Eliezer ben Samuel de Gengem, Joseph bon fils de Limoges, Haïm ben Isaac de La Rochelle, Menahem ben Salomon de Perpignan, Jacob ben Matthieu de Montpellier, Aaron ben Pérez d'Avignon, Abraham ben David de Narbonne. So many names which are so known all over the world. Because they have said something about the Bible, they have contributed to universal knowledge. They came from these villages and these villes that are our country. So when I heard, like you, we are in our home, said by some who would like others not to be and feel at home. Look at our history, all of it. The history of France is beautiful. Of cross cultures, these Jews who came from all over the world and came to our country and fought for it and turned it into a universal culture. All of these persons who wanted to keep their religion because they could be proud of their religion in our country. That's the history of Jews and France, even before the Republic, long before we started speaking about France. This is what we are. We are at home. All of us. Yesterday, at Quatsenheim, I felt shame. I was there with the people living in this small commune in Alsace, and they felt shame. And we looked at these desecrated graves, and I said to myself, what they want at the end of the day is to make sure that nobody can rest in peace. After shame comes anger, to try to find an answer, to answer hatred with more hatred. But at the end of the day, as I said to those living in that community, you are the real face of this community. We cleaned the tombs. And I told them how those who did that should feel shameful. They are not French. The tombs of Jewish French citizens are rooted like trees, and this rooting is our nation. So yes, I know, my friends, at times like this, it is difficult to do our task. Barbarian acts are forceful, it is immediate, it fascinates some, and it brings consternation to others, and barbarian acts has much more strength and intelligence of the building, the construction of our culture, and this is exactly what this force is looking for. We're not going to win this fight in one day, but I want to tell you something tonight. We will not get accustomed to it. We will always demand liberty, freedom, fraternity, and intelligence, which is the only response to these barbarian acts. We have to be courageous. That is our mission. As Republicans, it is slower, less visible sometimes. Sometimes we will stumble, but we will stand. Last Friday, I had the visit of one of the mothers, and she had a painting of Pierre Soulages. And I said, this is what we live for. Many thought that black was not a color, that nothing could be done with it. And a genius, who would be 100 years old this year, said, if you work all the time with black, with knives, with shapes, with forms, I will make the light come up. And this painting was becoming alive. Black was not black anymore. It was the other night, the other black of Soulages. We're not going to solve things through a piece of legislation or a speech, but we have to be standing all together, fighting against the evil, these lines of force. We need to be courageous. We have to preserve this form of humanity and intelligence that we have to provide even to the black sides of our society, because it is there. But we will stand. And at the end, we will win. We will prevail. Vive la République, vive la France.